Welcome, welcome. Today we're going to be summarizing RSA with our key takeaways. NIST finally updates the guidelines for protecting secrets, and Boeing doesn't want to pay any money.
He's Mike. I'm Steve. Welcome to Wired In.
Yes, Wired In, 10 breakdowns, 10 articles, everything listed in the comments below. We will break it all out after the live show so you can check out which segment you want to watch. Thanks for joining. Steve, I'm coming back from Red Hat Summit. RSA was last week. What did we miss?
I didn't. Well, you know what? I didn't actually go to RSA this year, but some people did. Leah Hyun, co-founder, CEO of Eureka Security, went through, heavily dominated by, guess what? AI. What a surprise! Yeah. Well, that's the least surprising thing I think we've ever seen, but it's good. I think this is something that we need to talk about like a troubled child. It is widespread. The adoption is there. How do we improve cybersecurity tools? Like, there's a positive spin on this, but I think they even use the word double-edged sword. How can attackers leverage AI against us, or how can they leverage our own mistakes, feeding sensitive information into LLMs that can be linked through prompt engineering? All of that discussion is in here. And the alternative, that takeaway, was just straight up data, because there's a very close relationship between data security and AI, because LLMs are data. And if we need to train our LLMs, then we've got our own data, perhaps customer data, perhaps even for public facing chatbots, et cetera, that are fed from AI. That data needs to be protected. And there's the whole new industry coming out around that.
Yeah, so there's three summaries there. It was the rise of AI and its risk, AI safety, data security, and there's also a call out at the bottom for things that aren't AI. It's at the bottom. And so they call out cloud data security, data lakes and warehouses, and file sharing security, which is always a complicated topic at big organizations.
It's still data.
Still data. And so you're seeing this, especially with AI, protecting that data, having it on-prem, having the right safeguards. That's going to be a constant conversation. The two things that never really go away in computer systems: data, security.
Yeah.
Even in the age of AI, those are constant topics. Yeah. Nothing's changing when it comes to that. But speaking of, since we're on the topic of AI, we might as well go over. So I was at Red Hat Summit in Denver. One of the first summits / events that felt like post-COVID, that felt full, that felt packed. Everybody was going around having a good time. One of the big announcements from the summit stage was InstructLab, which I thought was really cool, because a lot of these AI models are behind a paywall. You have to have API access. You have to pay for tokens. InstructLab is open source LLMs specifically for chatbots. So Red Hat and IBM partnered up to launch this. And what it is you could download and train your own model locally, and then you can run your data. If there's some public data that you want to run against it, create a better chatbot using your documentation or something like that. If you find out that the model performs better than the open source model, you can commit that model back, and it will obviously improve the model for future users. So the nice thing is it's open source. I can see a lot of use cases for this. Think if you're like a big bank, you don't want to pay for a model, download it, make sure it's secure first, obviously run it through your security team, but then you can run it against your documentation and build it into your app all for free.
That is very cool. Now, I read this and I was like, ooh, is there a tool time in this, do you think? Or is this like...
For sure. I mean, it's pretty easy to set up and get started. I did it locally on my Mac. I think that's what's cool, is you can go train your own model all locally and play around with it.
Awesome. In a world where I think a lot of us feel like we're falling behind on the ML AI because we're doing our real jobs, and if our job isn't AI, you're like, but I still want to be involved somehow. This looks like an amazing option.
Yeah, it was really cool. Try it out. Tool time coming up in the future. Steve, get on it.
Okay. All right. I like this one. It is a little bit of a SigStore inadvertent advert, but I liked the way it was broken down. This is Trevor Rosen, who goes through in almost like talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old version of where is your software coming from? And it talks about essentially dependencies, but it goes through in a very idiot's guide to using NPM, PyPy, et cetera. What's the software supply chain that builds an artifact that then just sits there as a zip or a container or whatever it is, whatever it might be, and you just use it. But there's an entire almost unknown or obfuscated through unintentional lack of knowledge, or there's nothing in the industry that allows us to know where things came from, about why we're just using it. And it is very, very idiot's guide, but it does go through, and this is what I really liked. You can see here, it says, well, you could just create a hash. And it says you could just run OpenSSL, create a digest, and then you can create, and a lot of digital downloads do have a hash next to them.
Yep.
Nobody ever verifies it, but it's often there, right? But then it starts going through everything you should do to make sure that you've got signed and attested artifacts. And it goes, well, what would you have to do something like this? It says certificates, make sure they can't be misused. It gives you a little checklist and really does show how difficult it is. And then it kind of goes on to say, SigStore takes care of this for you. So rather than just say, use SigStore, sign your stuff, I thought this was a really good article, which felt unbiased, to say, we really should be doing this.
Yeah, and GitHub is implementing this, I believe, right? That's the whole purpose of the article.
Yeah.
They're doing all the signing and the testing in the future for at least their software, what they publish.
Yep, exactly. So I thought this seems good. If you're thinking, what is SigStore? Do I need it? Why do I need it? More importantly, go check out the link down below.
The Idiot's Guide, the how-to.
Yep,
that's a good start.
That's why I liked it.
All right, on to the next one. This is the Mitre framework update. I believe you found this.
I did. I know. I'm a fan.
What do you think?
All right. So, if you don't know, the weird way they read attack, it looks like a bad password. This is attacker tactics and techniques and common knowledge. That's actually what that means. And it's a whole framework that gives you the kind of the whole kill chain across typical attacks and all the different methods that are involved in that. And it is constantly updated. Now, there's a whole bunch of different attack matrices, but they need to be updated because different attack vectors change as we progress forward. And if they don't update it, then it's just symbolic, right? It doesn't really matter. So it goes through a lot. Like, it's a pretty big article. And I thought, just for clarity, I'll bring up the one that's more relevant to us, because it's got one for mobile, it's got one for cross-domain campaigns, etc. But there's a cloud one specifically. And it talks about more actionability in terms of cloud. It's added attacks on CI/CD pipelines, infrastructure as code, all the stuff that we care about. And there's actually a link to go look at the cloud matrix you can see here. You click on that and you get the cloud matrix, and you can get an idea of what this looks like. How people establish initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, defense evasion, etc. The entire path, and education on every method in that space. So this is a huge, awesome learning opportunity, and it's just been updated for cloud, and it feels incredibly relevant.
Yeah, I think actionability is the key word, right? There's a lot of topics there, but I was clicking through and checking out some of the updates, and it was showing like, hey, this is how people take access of admin accounts, this is how people create users, right? And it showed just little tweaks that you can make to your Azure AWS environments to stop that, right? Some basic things.
Fantastic.
And it's just a great starting point, I think, for people to, I don't know, have a guideline to get started. I know people don't like to have compliance as security, but it's a great way to get started.
Speaking of great ways to get started.
Yes, another guideline update. This one is NIST. So the federal government of the US has updated their standards for how contractors, specifically contractors and other organizations that do business with the federal government, how they can protect sensitive data that they handle. I haven't gone through the actual draft version specifically, but yeah, I know it's going to be a heavy slog, but I do think that in the future, this will consistently get updated, especially with AI, especially with its relevance. And one of the interesting things that they put here is the update acknowledges the community's interest in making the safeguards available in machine readable format, such as JSON and Excel. That was the biggest thing I wanted to point out. Some of these guidelines, it's very hard to consume and build into your tool. NIST and the government, if they can do this in JSON, it's a lot easier to pull that directly from, like, all their updates directly from wherever they're publishing, and build it into your security tools, so you can build policies and run checks against what their updates are. You're not constantly having to like go, oh, what's the new NIST update? Pull some stuff down, build it into your software tool. You can just pull that machine readable format directly into your tool, update your policies, good to go. So it's a good thing that that NIST and the federal government is doing.
All right. So if you're unfamiliar with all of these different guidelines from NIST, just Google NIST SB 800 star
Yeah,
and spend the rest of your life reading.
pretty much. All right, on to the crazy stuff. Yeah, crazy stuff. So Boeing's in the headlines constantly. There's a bunch of stuff, but this one was the craziest one that came across my desk last 2 weeks. Unisuper's Google Cloud environment was deleted.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. This one, even internally, this was on our what the hell Slack channel. And it was like, how?
Yeah.
It doesn't actually go into how.
No. All it says is that Unisuper is I believe a retirement fund account. I think in like Australia, I want to
Yeah,
say.
it's an Australian fund of some sort.
Yeah, and they did have it built in 2 geographies. So Unisuper said it
Yeah.
lost its cloud infrastructure in 2 geographies, a configuration it believes should have kept it safer in an outage situation. Did somebody just go in and hit delete on the organization?
I don't know. It says, they deleted their private cloud subscription like in one geography, and somehow it deleted both. Like it was an intended redundancy so that something couldn't go wrong, and yet somehow they deleted the redundant as well, and then they killed their entire cloud
Yeah,
in one
and
go.
I believe it was so bad that the CEO or some exec came on and said, "This is a one-off event. This will never happen. Like, please don't leave our cloud."
Yeah. I mean, when a fund loses their entire cloud infrastructure, what is impressive is that they weren't actually down for that long. So now I think this is a cautionary tale for those who don't use infrastructure as code to provision their cloud, because they probably went, uh-oh, and just went blap. And I'm sure it took a long time to rebuild. And I'm sure they had data backups to give it all context and state. But imagine if you didn't have that, and you're dealing with money, that to me, it could have been catastrophic. I mean, good news generally is like Google Cloud and that really something that said they've worked out the sequence of events that made it happen, and they've made it so that you can't just delete your entire world anymore. There's a little pop-up that says, "Are you sure?"
Yeah. Those are your guardrails. Oh my. All right, on to more Boeing news. If you've been following, Boeing is constantly having some tough headlines lately. Boeing says it refused to pay massive ransomware demand. This was due to what's it called? The Lockbit Group and its affiliates. This was in November of last year, I believe, in 2023, where they hacked and exfiltrated, I think, 43 gigabits of data. It seemed like that's not it's big, but it's not significant, I think, to Boeing's data reserves. It just depends on what type of data. And then they said, "Hey, give us 200 million." Boeing's like, "What? You didn't?" I'm wondering. Maybe they thought there was going to be a negotiation. They thought they'd walk away with 5 or 10, but 200 million for 43 gigabits of data. That must be some primo data that you're hacking.
Or it wasn't, because they just went, no, go away. Like we still have backups of the data, and frankly, what you took isn't that big a deal. So I don't know. I kind of I feel like for once this might actually be a positive for not the hack, but the not paying is a positive for Boeing.
Yeah, and they probably have cyber insurance too, I'm assuming. A company like Boeing.
I mean, I would hope so.
So maybe it's just a way for Lockbit to get on the radar. I think sometimes you have these hacking groups where it's like they put it out there, they get a 200 million, they get the big headline, they hack 43 gigabits of data. Could be.
I don't know. It feels like bad PR for Lockbit.
Well, maybe if you're like a foreign adversary, you get to go to your bosses and say, "Hey, look, we're a publicly known hacking company."
Okay. All right. I'll buy it.
I'll take my tinfoil hat off now. All right, to the next one. Backlogs at the NVD, National Vulnerability Database. Prompt actions from NIST. Yeah, NIST is all over.
NIST and CISA again. They were all over last week or last show. Backlogs. Yeah. So basically, too much software. And therefore too many vulnerabilities to be handled by one organization short of resources. By the way, I'm just going to comment on, I love the way they put this article. It's like it's made for our show. Gigantic key bits, a little bit of text, some random dude, big important thing. So like, this is great. Thank you, whoever made this article, CISO Online. But security firms, I like this. And this is ChainGuard who said this. We're relying on social media to get more in-depth information on vulnerabilities now. Like they're not even keeping up with the CPE matches for the CVEs. And if you don't know what you probably know what CVEs are if you're watching our show, but the CPE is the platform enumeration. So like there's a vulnerability. Well, where is it and in what versions?
Mm-hmm.
That's not being updated. And that's the stuff you really need to know.
Yes. And they're reaching out to private companies to solve this issue. Red Hat has Red Hat Security Advisory, where we look at CVEs and then we evaluate our products and we backport fixes and we publish all those bugs and things like that. You might see a world where all of that work is done by private companies and you don't necessarily trust the NVD database if they're not keeping it up to date. Right.
Yeah. And
which is kind of scary, because then it basically becomes like you're only going to be consuming software back from those big companies because you don't trust anything else.
I mean, it's actually an odd plus because NVD was open and anyone on a way could create a software composition analysis tool pulling it from NVD. But any major commercial organization, like you just mentioned, you have your own. Palo has their own, because it's just never quite good enough for actual real-time commercial software. I did like the end. It just talked about CISA's involvement. We didn't really talk about that. They have a vulnerable. I just love the name vulnerable. I mean, that's such a terrible mix, but to help fill the gaps. So they're aiming at bringing people together to try and fix the NVD backlog. Sounds good. I hope it works. We will see.
Yeah. Stay tuned for more information.
Yeah, I just want to say vulnerable again.
Yeah, somebody had fun coming up with that. Okay, yep. We got 2 left for you. This one I feel like should be common sense if you're in the security space, if you've been working in containers at all. But I feel like every 6 months an article like this comes out. Millions of Docker repos found pushing malware and phishing sites. 20% of the 15 million repositories hosted by Docker Hub contained malicious content ranging from spam to dangerous malware and phishing sites. 20%.
There's one stat in here that didn't make any sense to me. Researchers discovered almost 4.6 million repositories containing no Docker images.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if they realize that a Docker repository is just a repository. And in fact, you can use cosign and you can put attestations in Docker Hub and there's no image. So that was like, okay, I don't think that's rocket science.
I'm just more shocked that Docker Hub allows some of this stuff. Like obviously you have verified images, and if you're only going to pull from Docker, you should pull a verified image, run your scanning tool against it, make sure everything's all that stuff. But are they trying to up the user count for investments? Like, why are they allowing some of these bot accounts to go and create stuff?
Yeah,
like there should be some limitations to these accounts, right?
It also feels too easy to make an account with a bot.
Yeah. I just don't know if there's an engineering reason why they're not doing it. Would love to hear about that. But yeah, at some point, if you go on X or Twitter and there's a bunch of spam bots, they're going to try to do something about it, hopefully. Yeah. Why it just feels like Docker's not doing anything about it.
Doesn't look good. Hey, let's move on to the last and certainly not least and very much a headliner in the WTF category. Wiz, cybersecurity, what's a decacorn they're calling them? It's not a unicorn. It's because you're like the power of 10 unicorns.
Oh.
New word, right?
Yep.
They were going to acquire Lacework, and we were going to put it on the last show. And I was then going to do a little blurb about it because I kind of done a little bit of personal, best fit to see whether I thought Lacework and Wiz did go together. And I actually thought it was pretty good because Wiz kind of cornered the market and is leading in the whole agentless category. We knew that they were developing something a bit more real time because one of the downsides of agentless is generally the delay. If you find something wrong, well, when did the agentless scan the API? Like you don't really have real-time security and actionability out of it, but they do an incredibly good job at making the other version easy. Lacework was full on real-time agents. And they had their own weird patented technology, which had a weird name. I can't remember what it was called. And they were declining. Yes. So great way to catch that fall, right? And the sad bit is like, it says right here, when we first started the show, Lacework was the biggest single investment we reported, I think in a December 2 years ago or something.
Yep.
Like 500 million or something. And we like blew our minds, which is almost the entire reason why we created the big spender category.
Pretty much. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
crazy. Everyone was throwing money around during COVID, I want to say 3-4 years ago, and it was massive. A valuation of 8.3 billion. And then you see this headline, and the headline comes up, it's valued at 150 to 200 million. What's going on?
Yeah.
There is a caveat there. They did say that the cash reserves would go back to the investors instead of being acquired by Wiz, which doesn't always happen. For example, when IBM bought HashiCorp, they got $1.2 billion in cash. So you have to kind of bring that price down. It's just a decision that companies make, but it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, 800 million going back, which is not even coming close to covering the investment, right? However, what is going on? What due diligence? What skeletons came out of that closet that they went, wait, hold on. Is it like WeWork or what?
Yeah, and typically when you go in to try to acquire something, you sign a contract that says unless you violate these specific rules, you don't have the ability to back out. Or if you do back out, you have to pay a penalty, right? You don't just get to go say, hey, I'm going to acquire you. Like, just kidding. Bye.
Yeah.
Lacework would be able to sue Wiz if it wasn't something that Lacework violated. So maybe we'll wait for that headline to come through. But
Yeah.
I'm very curious that either Wiz's lawyers wrote a very good, I guess, due diligence thing that Lacework broke, or Lacework just violated something, and see you later.
Yeah. What is the future of Lacework? Well, keep tuning in to this show, and we will bring you regular updates as to what on earth is going on in cybersecurity.
Yes, regular updates, bi-weekly updates. All the links are in the description below. Check out our big spender category. That's 1-minute breakdowns. And Steve's going to have some tool times for you. Long, 50 minutes, hands-on. Check it out. Until next time, he's Steve. I'm Mike. Take care.